Good afternoon. A federal judge has rejected a request from the Trump administration to lift a court order which was preventing it from deporting people using the Alien Enemies Act. So it's over. We're done. Yay! Not even close. What we're going to do now is discuss briefly what this is. It sounds complex. It's not. What it is it's detailed, and you have to sort of follow the chain of events. Those of you who've been paying attention since the beginning are going to have some idea of what I'm about to talk about. So, what is a restraining order? A restraining order is something that says you may not do this, according to a judge, and there can be any number of penalties for violating said restraining order. We'll get to that in a minute. A temporary restraining order is, it usually takes a minimum of 2 weeks to a month to get a court date. The big lie of the United States legal system is, one of the big lies, is that they're so far behind and inundated with work. Well, they do have a lot of work and a lot of paperwork, but the reality is, if you go to most courts in the United States, you'll find that many of the judges go home by 2 p.m. They are not overloaded. What they are is interested in having people solve their own problems. My father, a lawyer, once said it was the job of a judge to make sure that both sides go away unhappy. That way, next time, they decide to try to resolve the problems on their own and not drag the courts into this. It's in nobody's best interest to go before a court, if at all avoidable. Having said that, it's not that children are little adults. No, adults are very big children. It's been my experience, having taught children, having taught summer camp, having taught adults, having spent all of my life around one or another, that they are phenomenally similar. What really happens more as adults is the games that they play get somewhat more complicated, the stakes get higher, and they get petty and mean and cruel about different things, but still have all of that in them. And it takes a lot of work to try to overcome those instincts. They are very deep in us, unfortunately. The courts would rather we deal with it ourselves. So they deliberately schedule things far out in advance, but there is always room for an emergency and for orders to be heard just like that if they need to be. And what a temporary restraining order is, when a restraining order is going to take too long to get, you can get a temporary restraining order. Temporary restraining orders are very limited, but they're very powerful. One of the reasons they're very powerful is because they can be issued ex parte. What that means is you don't even need the other side there. You just show up and say, I need a temporary restraining order until we can hear the full regular restraining order before that can be decided on, because this is so serious. There are a few things that have to be overcome in order to get a TRO. The first is you have to show that you're likely to win the original restraining order. You can't just get a TRO because, I'm getting a restraining order and there's a 50-50 on it. No, you have to show it's more likely than not that you're actually going to win the full restraining order. The burden is on you to show that, because you are trying to enjoin someone against a certain act before they've even had a chance to defend themselves. So the bar is really, really high. A TRO is essentially an emergency situation. The other thing with a TRO is you have to show that irreparable harm will come if the TRO is not granted. If you can clear both of those hurdles, and they're not easy, then the TRO is granted, and usually the TRO lasts until the hearing on the actual restraining order. A TRO cannot last years or months. It usually lasts weeks. It ends when there's the restraining order is heard and is issued, and and the defendant gets a chance to say, "Hey, here's why." So that's it. You have a TRO, a regular restraining order. That's what's at issue here. Now, there has been a restraining order request against the use of the Alien Enemies Act. However, that's going to take a while to be heard, so a TRO was issued. A judge felt that all of the requirements of the TRO were met and ordered the Trump administration not to deport anyone using the Alien Enemies Act. The introduction to today's order covers all of this beautifully. It's extraordinarily well written, so I'm actually going to basically read from that because it explains everything so well. But it basically said, listen, you can still deport people. Go ahead and deport people. Deport whoever you want. We're not telling you you can't deport people. We're telling you you can't use the Alien Enemies Act until the motion on the actual restraining order is heard. And you still have a right to defend yourself. You still have a right to come on in and tell us why you need to do it. But until we hear that, you're going to stop. Trump violated it, deported 200 and some odd Venezuelans to Venezuela. After doing so, the judge found out and immediately ordered the planes around. The Trump administration has issued a number of defenses to this. They've said, well, the planes were in the air, international waters. You don't have jurisdiction. That is false. That's actually been decided previously. If it's an American airplane, he's got jurisdiction. He was also the Trump administration was absolutely in violation of the TRO by even letting the planes take off from the ground. Their defense to that was well, you had only said the order by that point. It hadn't actually been issued written, and until it's written, it's not legal. So the planes took off in the intermitting time, which it appears may actually have happened. It doesn't matter. The judge had issued his ruling. So the judge was not impressed by that argument. They also said reasons. I'm not kidding. They said reasons. They said national security reasons. We can't tell you. You can't make us tell you, but we're right. You're wrong. Thank you. So that's the order of things. Now, the judge appears to, at this point, be deciding that he is going to. All right, thank you for that. We have a problem. We have an extraordinarily serious problem, which is that Trump has been empowered to do just about anything he wants in a decision aptly entitled. Let me see if I can find it. Aptly entitled Donald Trump versus the United States. The court ruled that he has effectively immunity from the law while he is president. In her dissent, Justice 𝐒𝐚𝐬 Sotomayor wrote, quote, "This court effectively has created a law-free zone around the president, upsetting the status quo that has existed since the founding." She added, "When he uses his official powers in any way, under the majority's reasoning, he will now be insulated from criminal prosecution. For example, quote, if he orders the Navy SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival, immune. Orders a military coup to hold on up to power, immune. Takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon, immune, 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 immune. Never in the history of our republic has a president had reason to believe that he would be immune from criminal prosecution if he uses the trappings of his office to violate criminal law. With fear for our democracy, I respectfully dissent." That case is what appears to have made it so that Donald Trump can completely ignore the orders of any court. He has had his lawyers show up and make ludicrous defenses. The defenses have been thrown out, but there doesn't seem to be much the judges can do. They can't arrest him. They can't order the police to arrest him. They can try to find him in contempt, in criminal contempt, anything like that. He can pardon himself unless it's a state court. If it's a state court, they can't find him in criminal contempt because of another ruling by the Supreme Court that basically makes the state courts unable to pursue any criminal action against a sitting president. Immune, 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 immune. Sotomayor seems to have gotten it correctly. So, at any rate, what is the order that was issued today? Well, Donald Trump is, despite being immune, fighting all of this. My suspicion is because it doesn't cost him a penny, it costs the American taxpayer. And because as long as he's fighting this, people aren't paying attention to the other terrible things that he's doing. And if he manages to eke out a win, it probably makes his life slightly easier in a few areas. So what order was issued today? Donald Trump is attempting to make it legal for him to deport anybody he wants to under the Alien Enemies Act. And I'm not kidding, anybody he wants to, even American citizens. This is also pointed out in the judge's opinion today. He can, this was done in World War II. American citizens, people who were born and raised in the United States but had Japanese heritage, were interned in internment camps for up to 5 years by this law. This law strips due process from anybody, so long as they can be declared an enemy of the state. And guess who gets to make that declaration now without any judicial oversight? It's really a terrifying thing. We'll get to that one again in a minute. At any rate, the TRO is currently in effect. The RO has not yet been heard. The TRO says that he may not use this law he can still deport people, he just can't use this law to deport people. The reason that's important is because in order to deport people in the United States, they have to have committed a crime. And with this law, they do not have to have committed a crime. We have now learned that as many as 2/3 of the Venezuelans, I think it was 260 some odd Venezuelans who have been deported, 2/3 committed no crime. He actually used that as a defense. Your Honor, they haven't been in this country long enough to commit a crime. That's why we have to deport them now. And in fact, the fact that they have clean records is an indicator that they're guilty. That was the fucking argument. I'm not kidding. So, Trump has decided that in addition to trying to make a number of ludicrous arguments that will not succeed, in fact, have basically already failed before this judge as to why he has not violated the TRO, or even if he had, the judge has no jurisdiction to enforce the TRO. All those arguments failed. He issued an emergency request to vacate the TRO. What we have today is the response to his attempt to vacate the TRO. Normally, we wouldn't cover a motion to vacate, especially if it's been denied. But this is so serious, and there's going to be so much litigation over this step by step by step by step that I think it's important to cover each step. So, as I've said, it may appear complicated. It's not. There is a order. They have filed a motion for a restraining order to block him from using this law. But that's going to take too long, so to stop him from using it immediately until that motion can be heard, they have issued a temporary restraining order, which they succeeded. He has now violated it repeatedly. He has made numerous defenses to the judge as to why his violations are acceptable. All of those defenses have failed. What the judge can or will do about it now, find him in contempt, I don't know. The judge appears to be powerless. I very much appreciate that he's acting as if he's got power and at least trying to do something. The only thing at this point that can restore any control over the executive branch is the Supreme Court. Between Alito, Thomas, and Justice Roberts, who has not engaged in quite as much shenanigans as the other two, but covers for them, this is one of the most corrupt Supreme Courts in American history, a genuinely corrupt Supreme Court. I don't think they want Trump to have as much power as he's got, but the only way to stop him is to put themselves at risk getting caught for all their corruption. So I think there's a problem. There may be enough legitimate members of the Supreme Court to do something, but so far, all that's happened is a lukewarm rebuke from Chief Justice John Roberts when Trump said, you know what, I don't like how this judge has been ruling. He should be impeached. Justice Roberts wagged his finger. It didn't even say who he was wagging his finger at, just said, nobody should be calling for the impeachment of judges just because you don't like their outcomes. When asked about that, Trump said, well, obviously he wasn't talking about me, or else would have mentioned me by name. So, what we have here is a denial of a request to vacate the TRO to allow Trump to continue to use the Alien Enemies Act until the actual RO hearing is held and a decision is decided based on the merits of the RO hearing. This motion was denied, so the temporary restraining order is still in effect. The denial was, in my view, quite beautifully written. I'm just going to cover the memorandum opinion, the very beginning. In the pre-dawn hours of Saturday, March 15th, 5 Venezuelan non-citizens being held in Texas by the Department of Homeland Security sought emergency relief in this court. They justifiably feared that in a matter of hours they might be removed from this country pursuant not to the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, but instead to by the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, a law that was last invoked in the wake of Pearl Harbor as the nation was preparing for a world war. That act authorizes the president to summarily remove natives, citizens, denizens, or subjects of a hostile nation or government when there is a declared war against it, or when it has perpetrated, attempted, or threatened the territory of the United States, an invasion, or a predatory incursion. The president, the plaintiffs believed, had secretly signed a proclamation invoking the act, and upon its imminent publication, the government would begin immediately removing them without any hearing to ensure that they fell within its scope. This is where we get to what we've been covering previously and what we said on Trump's inauguration day, the language that he was using when he was saying that Venezuelan gangs were, quote, invading the United States. The use of the word invading is extraordinarily important because it triggers certain wartime powers. The cartels are not invading the United States. He has nonetheless said in his executive orders that the cartels are semi-organized governments, and that therefore one can declare war on them, and that they are in fact at war with the United States. He essentially considers himself a wartime president and is using wartime powers to what would under other circumstances be break the law. There isn't a single dictator in the history of our species, in the history of written history, that has not done this in order to consolidate power. Netanyahu is doing it right now. Putin does it. Kim Jong-un does it. How many times has Un said that the U.S. is at war and it is only his nuclear weapons and his awesome power that keeps them at bay, and they'd better keep him in power and they'd better worship him like a god, or else North Korea will collapse. This is the playbook, line for line. So, the president, plaintiffs believed, had secretly signed as expected, later that day, the president did indeed publish a proclamation announcing that because Tren de Aragua, a violent transnational criminal organization based in Venezuela, had committed a, quote, invasion or, quote, predatory incursion upon the United States, the government could begin immediately deporting any Venezuelan non-citizens it deemed to be members of Tren de Aragua. Now, keep in mind, that it deemed, not a judge, not an independent third party, that they deemed. This is an explicit violation of the separation of powers and of checks and balances. Now Trump gets to declare who is a member of this group and who he can deport. But wait, they protest. The government was mistaken. Each vehemently denies being a member of Tren de Argura. I'm going to have problems with that one for a while. I'm going to have to just sit down and memorize that one. And thus subject to the proclamation. Several, in fact, claim that they fled Venezuela to escape the predations of the group and that they braved fear consequences if deported solely because of the government's unchallenging of this labeling. Plaintiffs therefore sought a temporary restraining order to prevent the government from deporting them or other Venezuelan non-citizens under this proclamation without a hearing. To preserve the status quo until the plaintiffs' claims could be properly adjudicated, the court issued 2 temporary restraining orders that together prohibited the government from relying solely on the proclamation to remove the plaintiffs or any other Venezuelan non-citizens in its custody. Neither order required the government to release a single individual from custody. Neither order prevented the government from apprehending anyone pursuant to the just published proclamation. And neither order prevented the government from deporting anyone, including the plaintiffs, through authority other than the proclamation, such other authorities such as the INA. Indeed, as the president last month designated Tren de Argura a foreign terrorist organization, members of the gang are already inadmissible to the United States under the INA and thus can be deported. The government now moves to vacate. Now, this is an extraordinarily important point. We've discussed on this before. Since it's a criminal gang, they're already violating the law and can already be deported. The only reason to use the Alien Enemies Act is to deport them without a hearing, to be able to deport them without proof, be able to deport them without showing that they are members of the gang. The due process isn't in the deportation. It's in the making sure that you're deporting the correct person. That's all. And the judge made that, I thought, crystal clear in this section. All he did was say you cannot deport people using this law until we sort it out. And you can deport people using every other means at your disposal, including his authority to deport criminals. If these 4 are already criminals, he can already deport them. The government now moves to vacate the TRO, primarily on the grounds that there is not a sufficient likelihood that the plaintiffs will succeed on their legal claims. Again, remember, we talked about there are 2 requirements for TRO. One is that there will be significant harm if the TRO is not granted. 2, that the RO is likely to succeed. If it's not likely to succeed, you cannot get a TRO. So the government argued that they're not going to succeed. The president's unprecedented use of the act outside of a typical wartime context and the plaintiff's various challenges to such use implicates a host of complicated legal issues, including fundamental and sensitive questions about the often circumscribed extent of judicial power in matters of foreign policy and national security. Such concerns arise principally in connection with the plaintiff's connection that any action taken pursuant to the proclamation is unlawful because, despite the president's declaration otherwise, Tren de Argura is not a foreign nation or government, and its actions, however heinous, do not amount to an invasion or predatory incursion. The good news. The court need not resolve the thorny question of whether the judiciary has authority to assess this claim in the first place. That is because the plaintiffs are likely to succeed on another equally fundamentally sound theory. Before they may be deported, they are entitled to an individualized hearing to determine whether the act applies to them at all. As the government itself concedes, the awesome power granted by the act may be brought to bear only on those who are in fact alien enemies, and the Supreme Court and this circuit have long maintained that the federal courts are equipped to adjudicate that question when individuals threatened with detention and removal challenge their designation as such. Because the named plaintiffs dispute that they are members of Trende Argura, they may not be deported until the court has been able to decide the merits of their challenge. Nor may any members of the previously certified class be removed until they have been given the opportunity to challenge their designations as well. The motion to vacate is thus denied. All right. So what we have here is a very simple procedural thing. Trump trying to get around the TRO, all of his defenses for why it was invalid have been ignored. So now he just tried to have a motion to vacate. That motion was struck down. But that succinctly put exactly what the problem was. He argued a number of complicated things, and the judge passed by all of it and said none of that really matters. What really matters is that they have the right to have a hearing, and that right has been denied, and the denial of that right is likely to lead to harm, and the denial of that right is likely to be upheld in the future court. So the TRO is going to stand. So the TRO stands, and eventually there will be a hearing on the RO. So the RO has not been, I heard one report that said the RO has, been decided and Trump can't use this law. He can't right now. It's a temporary injunction. This judge, they have a really good head on their shoulders. This doesn't even move the ball down the playing field, really. It stops Trump from trying to but we're no further than we were, except that there is yet another argument saying, look, you cannot use this law right now. You have not succeeded in justifying your use of this law, and I'm enjoining you against using this one law. You can use all the others. If somebody shoots somebody in the street, you want to deport them, go right ahead. You can't use this law because this law denies people due process, and we're going to have due process to figure out if you can deny people due process. Let me check on one other quick thing, then I'm going to check on the live chat, and then we're going to head out. I wanted to make this really reasonably short, but I thought the judge replied quite eloquently to that issue, and we're going to hear more today on the consequences for Trump violating the TRO. Again, I really would like to hear. I would like to hear what the judge says, knowing full well that it can't be enforced. And the current Supreme Court is to blame for that. And again, the current Supreme Court can fix this. The current Supreme Court can absolutely fix the mess we're in. The problem is, it's one of the most corrupt Supreme Courts we've ever had, and that have to expose themselves in order to do it. I don't find them likely to do it, and Alito probably is not likely to do it anyway, because a lot of his, both Alito and Thomas, a lot of their corruption stems from having empowered Trump to do most of this stuff in the first place. There is also, I guess, now an appeals court. An appeal has been filed on this decision. That was quick. They knew they were going to lose. They claim that the lower court does not have the authority to grant the TRO, and that it was okay to violate the TRO because the lower court didn't have the authority. That's no. You're not allowed to break the law, even if the law is wrong. You cannot anticipate that a law will be overturned and therefore ignore that law. That's not how it works. But anyways, we'll see how the appeal goes. So, and again, we're not going to probably go for breaking with the appeal. The next big thing in regards to this is I think, going to be either the Trump's final decision on what the penalties are going to be for violating the TRO and how he intends to enforce them, and or whether or not this becomes a permanent restraining order against the use of this act and how he replies. But again, I thought that this was a worthwhile motion to cover. So we've done that, and it looks like, all right, we don't have any super chats, so that we can move on past that. And I think we had one other question that I do need to address really quickly from the Discord. I will check that out. Yeah, okay, I got that. Thank you so much. All right. So having said that, tomorrow in time, we're going to have a lot to discuss. That's assuming, we'll see how much breaking news there's going to be. We are anticipating at least one story in another area that could be coming out as early as today. So make sure you have hit the bell, get all notifications, because there's a lot going on. We're also going to... No, okay, we'll skip that. So we're also going to have downtime with Commander Lance McMillan on Thursday. I'd love to discuss something other than all of this. I think all of us could use a break, and that's kind of what downtime is for. Having said that, it's also for picking his ear on or picking his brain on issues like this, where in many instances he has a considerable greater depth of knowledge than I do. So we will have to see what he says. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow for In Time or at the next breaking news. So we do have two Canadian that just came in. Did they let Doge back in today? My understanding is, I don't know. I haven't checked on that. That's a good question. So Doge was blocked from the Social Security Administration. It has been made clear by the judge that the normal SSA employees are permitted, but Doge is not. If Doge has violated that order, I am unaware of it. You'd think that would make the news. Sometimes the absence of news is kind of news itself. I haven't heard that they've violated it, so that suggests to me that they haven't. Having said that, they will, and they'll start to do it incrementally in some little ways. In fact, the head of the Social Security Administration has already paved the way for that by saying, oh, well, actually, we all kind of work for Doge anyway, because we're going to do what Elon Musk tells us, so none of us can enter the building because we're all affiliated with Doge. So, again, it's weaponized compliance, and the judge is like, no. There's Doge, there's the Social Security Administration, go in and do your job. So, presumably, they've all gone back to work, and presumably, Doge is not in there. But again, I think they want to have that fight. I just think they don't want to have that fight yet. They want that fight to occur slowly over time. They want benefits to start receding slowly over time. The first few months when benefits are being cut back, well, it's because of all these advocate judges that have kept Doge out of the building. Get mad at those judges when more and more benefits are cut. Oh, well, it's, Democrats have been, blocking our spending or whatever. And if it all happens in one fell swoop, you're much likely to see mass protests. If they can cut it bit by bit by bit so that they don't have the entire country cut off all at once, I think that's what they're looking for. And they very nearly had a situation where it was going to be, that was what we covered last time. I mean, the offices, the head of the Social Security Administration threatened to close it. I don't think they want that, but not today. So, very good question. Thank you very much for that super chat. Much appreciated. And we will catch up with you next time. Have a good day.